I came home that evening expecting the usual warmth. My wife's laugh echoing from the kitchen, the smell of dinner cooking, the little notes she'd leave me around the house. But the apartment was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes your heart skip a beat. My keys jingled in the lock, then clattered onto the counter. That's when I saw it. A single piece of paper, folded neatly, sitting on the kitchen table. Not under a plate, not tucked in a book, just there. My name scribbled on it, unmistakable. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I didn't notice at first, but the air smelled different, stale, heavy, like the calm right before a storm. I wanted to laugh it off, tell myself she'd gone out to surprise me with something, or maybe just a prank. But the handwriting, the way she wrote my name, it was different. Careful, deliberate. There was a weight to it that made me pause. And then, I unfolded the note. The first words hit me like a punch to the gut. I can still feel it, the sudden drop in my stomach, my pulse hammering in my ears, the way the room seemed to tilt ever so slightly. It wasn't a long note, but the words were sharp, precise, and cold in a way I'd never seen from her. It wasn't angry, not exactly. It was something worse. Quiet. Final. I sat down, the note trembling in my hands, trying to make sense of it. My mind raced through every argument, every cold silence, every little thing I might have missed. But nothing could prepare me for what came next. The note wasn't just about leaving, it was about me. About us. About something I didn't even know I had done. I remember staring at the words over and over, hoping my brain would rearrange the letters, make a mistake, tell me this wasn't real. But the message was crystal clear. My wife, she was gone. And she wasn't coming back. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. I called her phone. No answer. Repeated it. Nothing. My legs gave way beneath me, and I slid onto the floor, the note still clutched in my hand. Every sound in the apartment seemed magnified. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the wall clock, the distant sirens outside. The world felt wrong. Then I noticed something else. A second piece of paper, partially hidden under the note, peeking out like it was waiting for me to see it. My breath caught. I froze, knowing that whatever was written on that second note would change everything I thought I knew about her, about us. I swallowed hard. My hands shook as I reached for it. And just as I lifted the corner to read, a sudden knock at the door made me jump. We had been married for 7 years, and most of the time, it felt like a story I didn't want to end. Emily, my wife, was the kind of person who made ordinary days feel like little miracles. She laughed loudly, sometimes too loudly, and she had a way of noticing the small things about people that no one else seemed to see. I thought I knew her completely. I thought I could read her like an open book. But lately, something had been different. It started subtle, almost invisible. She would come home from work a little later than usual, tired, distracted. Sometimes she wouldn't answer my texts for hours, and when I asked if everything was okay, she'd smile, say, "I'm fine." But there was a weight in her eyes I didn't understand. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that maybe work was stressful, that maybe I was imagining it. But deep down, a small voice whispered that something was wrong. Our apartment, once filled with warmth, had begun to feel hollow. The tiny routines we had, the coffee together in the mornings, the weekend trips to the park, the late-night conversations about nothing and everything, had started to shrink. I didn't notice at first. I thought life just got busy. But now, staring at that note, I realized I had been blind. Emily had a way of holding herself that I never paid enough attention to. The way she'd fidget with her rings when she was anxious, the way her eyes darted when she wanted to hide something. I remembered the nights she stayed up late on her laptop, the muffled sobs I thought were from a sad movie, the long, silent drives she took alone. I had assumed she was stressed, or tired, or just in her own head. But maybe it was all signs I never read. I couldn't help replaying the last few weeks in my mind. The way she hesitated when I asked if she wanted to go on vacation, the times she brushed off dinner plans, the moments she seemed distant. I had thought it was me, that I had done something wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And now, with that note in my hand, I understood that it wasn't just a fleeting feeling. It was real, and it was coming to a head. I looked around the apartment, the framed photos on the walls, the little keepsakes from trips, the books stacked neatly on the shelf, and for the first time, it all felt like someone else's home, like a place I was visiting, not living in. Emily had filled it with life, and now her absence made everything feel empty. And yet, there was a part of me that refused to believe she could just leave. Maybe she was waiting for me somewhere. Maybe she had left because of something I could fix. Maybe the note was just a test. I unfolded the second piece of paper under the first. My heart thumped. My hands were shaking, and for a moment, I hesitated, afraid to know what it said. I realized then that I had no idea who my wife really was. Not completely. And whatever she had written, it was going to change everything. I stared at the second note, my eyes scanning the words over and over. Each line seemed carefully chosen, almost surgical, and yet the meaning twisted my stomach into knots. It wasn't just a goodbye. It was a warning. Something had happened, something I hadn't noticed, something that had been creeping into our lives like a shadow. I couldn't breathe properly. My mind raced through every conversation, every glance, every minor argument we'd had. Had I missed a sign? Was I blind to her pain? Or worse, had she been hiding something from me? My chest felt tight, like I was suffocating under the weight of questions I didn't even know how to ask. The apartment felt colder than before. Shadows from the dim evening light stretched across the walls, and the silence pressed down on me like it was alive. I kept imagining her coming through the door, smiling, explaining it all, and I kept imagining her walking away instead, disappearing forever without a word. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through our messages, hoping to find a clue, anything that could make sense of this. But the more I looked, the more the messages felt off. Casual texts that once seemed innocent now appeared loaded, deliberate, and the photos we had taken together, the ones I had cherished, suddenly felt like snapshots from a life I hadn't been a real part of. Then came the sound, faint at first, almost dismissible, but unmistakable, a soft thud from her bedroom. My heart lurched. I froze, listening. Another thud, then a dragging noise, slow and deliberate. I wanted to call out her name, to tell myself it was nothing, that she was fine, but my voice caught in my throat. My instincts screamed that something was very wrong. I moved toward the bedroom, my legs heavy, my mind screaming for answers. Every step felt like it took forever. The doorknob was cold in my hand, and I hesitated, a sudden terror rooting me in place. I could feel my pulse in my temples, in my ears, in every inch of my body. And then I saw it. The door was cracked open just enough to let a sliver of light spill into the hallway. And through that sliver, I glimpsed something that made my stomach drop, the shadow of a figure moving inside the room, but it didn't move like her. I swallowed hard, barely daring to breathe, and then the light flickered. I stood frozen outside the bedroom, my hand hovering over the doorknob, my heart hammering like it was trying to escape my chest. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to call the police, to get out of the apartment, but I couldn't move. Not yet. I had to know. I had to see what was happening inside. The shadow shifted again, slower this time, almost deliberate. It wasn't moving like Emily. It was wrong. My stomach twisted, and cold sweat ran down my back. I took a shallow breath and nudged the door open, just a fraction, enough to peek inside. The room was dimly lit by the fading glow of the evening sun through the blinds. And there she was, or at least, someone who looked like her. Sitting on the edge of the bed, hair falling in front of her face, hands clutching something tightly. She, or it, didn't move when I spoke her name. Emily. My voice cracked. The sound was foreign in my own ears, trembling, desperate. The figure lifted her head slowly. And then I saw it. Her eyes, they weren't Emily's. Not really. There was something hollow, distant, almost alien. My chest tightened, and a shiver ran down my spine. I stumbled back, gripping the doorframe for support. I wanted to turn away, to shut the door and pretend I hadn't seen anything, but I couldn't. There was a note on the bed, lying just in front of the figure. My second note, the one that had made my blood run cold. It wasn't like the first, it wasn't just words. It was a map of something, of secrets, of betrayals, of things I had never known about her. I knelt, my hands shaking, and reached for it, trying to make sense of the scrawled handwriting. And then I noticed the sound again, the dragging, slow, deliberate, coming from the closet. I froze. My pulse raced, a drum in my ears. The room, once familiar, felt like a trap. The bed, the dresser, the walls, they all seemed to close in. The figure on the bed hadn't moved an inch, but I could feel its presence like a dark weight pressing on my chest. Then the closet door creaked. Slowly, One tiny movement that made my skin crawl. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't about Emily leaving. This was bigger. Something had been living here with us, hidden, unnoticed, waiting. And somehow, it had to do with her note. My hands shook as I reached for my phone, thinking to call someone, anyone, but it slipped out of my grasp. I fell to my knees, heart pounding, and glanced back at the bed. The figure's head tilted, as if it had known I'd try to escape, as if it had been expecting me all along. I felt a cold, creeping dread settle over me. Whatever was in this apartment, whatever had changed Emily, it wasn't human. And it wasn't going to let me leave without knowing. I took a shaky breath. I had to see it. I had to understand. And then, from the closet, a voice whispered my name. The whisper came again, closer this time, and my blood ran cold. It wasn't Emily's voice. It was lower, raspy, almost mocking. I spun toward the closet, heart hammering, and yanked the door open. The room inside was empty, but on the floor lay a small recorder, its red light blinking. I bent down and pressed play. Emily's voice filled the room, but not in the way I expected. She wasn't calling me. She was warning me. My husband, he has to know. There's something in the apartment. I tried to leave, but it's already too late. My head snapped toward the bed. The figure, Emily, or someone pretending to be her, was gone. The note lay open, the last words scrawled in frantic handwriting. If you read this, it knows you too. I backed toward the hallway, stomach churning. My apartment, my safe haven, had become a trap. Something had been living here, hiding in plain sight, feeding on our life. And now, after all these years, it had me. I froze as I heard footsteps behind me, soft, deliberate, moving closer. I wasn't alone anymore. I spun around, chest heaving, trying to see who, or what, was behind me. The apartment felt impossibly dark, every shadow stretching, twisting, alive. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, a slow, deliberate creak came from the bedroom doorway. I edged toward it, fists clenched, heart pounding. And there she was, Emily. Or at least, it looked like her, standing perfectly still, eyes wide, expression unreadable. Why are you doing this? I whispered, my voice shaking. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then she raised her hand, pointing toward the living room. I followed the gesture and froze. The note, the recorder, even the shadows, they weren't the real danger. Behind the couch, in the dim corner of the room, something moved. A figure, twisted, inhuman, with Emily's face stretched like a mask. Its eyes gleamed, unnatural, and it smiled. Slowly, maliciously, I realized with horror, the Emily in front of me wasn't Emily. It had been hiding in plain sight, imitating her perfectly, while the real Emily had been trapped somewhere else, leaving the notes, warning me. My stomach twisted, panic rising like fire. I lunged forward, heart racing, grabbing the figure, but it melted away, slipping through my hands like smoke. The real Emily appeared then, pale, trembling, from behind the closet door. She grabbed my arm, whispering urgently, "It knows us, it can take forms, but it's afraid of the truth." "What truth?" I demanded, fear choking me. She handed me a small, tattered book she'd been hiding. Inside were notes, sketches, and warnings, revealing the entity had been feeding on our lives, copying people it had observed, learning their secrets. It wasn't human. It couldn't love, couldn't feel, but it could destroy everything we held dear. I glanced at the figure again. It was gone. For now. But Emily's last words made my blood run cold. "It's still here, in you, if you let it. And it knows your darkest fears." I realized then that surviving it wouldn't just mean escaping the apartment. It meant surviving our own minds, and hoping whatever had been living among us never found a way back in. The first light of morning seeped through the blinds, pale and trembling, as if the world itself had been holding its breath. I sat on the edge of the bed, Emily next to me, her hand gripping mine tightly. Neither of us spoke for a long while. The apartment felt still, normal almost, but I knew that normalcy was fragile, a veneer stretched thin over the memory of what had happened. We went through every room together, checking, locking, and reinforcing what we could. Nothing moved. No shadow flickered. No footsteps echoed. The entity hadn't returned. Not yet. "I can't believe it," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "All this time, I didn't even know." Emily shook her head, tears glimmering in her eyes. I tried to warn you. I tried to protect you, protect us. That's why I left the notes. That's why I stayed silent sometimes. I couldn't fight it alone. Her honesty cut through the fear and tension that had lodged in my chest. It was her voice, her presence, her humanity that anchored me. I realized then that the real horror hadn't just been the entity. It had been the thought of losing her, of being alone in a world that suddenly seemed unrecognizable. We sat together in silence for a while, letting the calm settle around us. Outside, the city was waking up, distant traffic, birds calling, the hum of life continuing as if nothing had happened. But inside, we were different. We had survived something unimaginable. I don't know if it's really gone, I admitted quietly. It might come back. Emily squeezed my hand. Then we'll be ready. Together. That's the only way. I nodded, and for the first time in what felt like days, I allowed myself to breathe. To hope. To believe that whatever darkness had tried to infiltrate our lives, whatever horrors had shadowed our every step, couldn't take away the bond between us. Still, as we packed away the notes, the sketches, and the book of warnings, I couldn't shake one lingering thought. The entity had been clever, patient, hiding in plain sight, learning everything about us. Could we ever be completely safe? The answer was unknown. But as I looked at Emily, her face pale but alive, her eyes steady and real, I realized that some things were stronger than fear. Love, trust, the determination to hold on to each other, no matter how impossible the circumstances. That, I decided, was the part it could never touch. We left the apartment that morning together, stepping into sunlight that felt brighter than it had in years. Every step was tentative, careful, but with a promise to rebuild, to heal, and to live despite what we had faced. And though the memory of the notes, the whispers, and the shadows would stay with me forever, one truth remained clear. Some mysteries are terrifying, yes, but surviving them shows what it truly means to be human.